We have two very interesting guests today. Our first guest is Brian O'Shea. He's an private intelligence analyst, private investigator, chief operating officer at Centurion Intelligence Partners. Served 11 years of active duty, worked as a senior consultant and subject matter expert for two of the U.S. government's top intelligence agencies. We've heard some of his ideas through his wife, Naomi Wolf, and now we're going to get it right from Brian himself. Alongside of Brian, we're going to bring in Dr. Li-meng, Chinese virologist known for her publications and interviews, where she has suggested that SARS-CoV-2 at least is a lab source and may have a nefarious maybe even something more nefarious going on than that. So I am prepared to be upset, surprised, disturbed, enlightened by today's guest. When Naomi spoke some of Brian's ideas, Susan has never quite gotten over it, and she set this combination up today, so let's get to it.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for Christ's sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
As I said, these are two exceptional guests from whom we are going to learn a great deal today, hopefully. I will be out on the Restream and also on the Twitter Spaces. I forgot to set up my Restream. I apologize for that. Susan, why don't you talk a little bit?
Restream, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch,
right.
Twitter. But we can see your comments on YouTube.
And tell people a little bit about what led you to setting this up.
Oh, I saw Mr. Wang with Putin last week on the news, shaking hands and being very chummy, and it made me nervous. So I wanted to talk to somebody that might have information on who took that video and, what it was for. And, I know Fox News was carrying the story, and then we talked to Tulsi Gabbard about it, and they were very concerned. So I said, we need some experts in here.
So let's bring in our first expert, Brian O'Shea. As I said, Brian is an intelligence analyst, private investigator. He is the chief operating officer at Centurion Intelligence. You can find out more at centurionintelligence.com, and also follow him on Twitter, Brian O'Shea, SPI. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I almost don't know where to start with this. Give me your impression of what has been going on. For instance, one of the mysterious chapters in the Chinese-American information exchange, let's say, that I find so curious is curious is the kindest thing I can say, is the chapter where we are convinced that locking down is the one and only God, thus saith the Lord, way to handle this virus. And our scientists bought that and sold it to the world. Do you have any sense of how that happened?
I mean, my sense of how that happened, and it's almost by the script, and I'll have to post the link, but Fauci almost looks like he was following a script. There was that joint conference that he did with their version of Fauci. And that the script he was actually following was almost verbatim from the Chinese Communist Party.
And was he hoodwinked, or was this something they had agreed on because they were sharing in this gain of function sort of nefarious thing? I'm actually going so far as think, or could this be a counterintelligence operation that Fauci's afraid he's going to harm somebody if he goes off on his own? What do you think?
Well, this won't be popular, but I think he was hoodwinked in the way academics can get hoodwinked. They believe that they are following a higher religion, that being science. And he said this much: these are scientists. These are people of science. Borders basically don't matter. And I think the Chinese Communist Party, and I say that because I am talking about the Chinese government, not the Chinese people. They know this. Yeah. They know how to play it. And there was even a point a few years back where they locked all the international scientists out of the Wuhan lab.
And the one of the odd things I noticed right at the beginning was that they had these trucks to roll out and men in the white suits. It was a completely rehearsed thing, this lockdown. And it also looked completely political to me as a way of saving face. So some superior didn't have to deal with anything beyond what was being sort of addressed in Wuhan. Is that part of the deal? They kind of knew this was going to happen or could happen?
I think they knew it happened. I think they knew it happened long before January. And I do believe the theater that we saw in the wet market of spraying things down was to show that they were setting the stage for, at a minimum, this came from the wet market. I mean, they were already setting up the excuse for where it came from. That's what I think that part was. And as far as the theater of the trucks and the spraying down, I mean, who knows what they were planning, what they were hoping to get out of that. It was a bit ridiculous. You might remember the butterfly nets and all that sort of thing. But they were trying to show
it was completely ridiculous. And I think, and I remember, that's why I'm so mystified that Fauci was hoodwinked by what they were suggesting was the right thing to do, something that was non-medical, never contemplated before, certainly something that he had never really thought about, I'm sure. Suddenly he's convinced that that's the way to handle. I still can't get my head around it. But as it pertains to the virus itself, why do you think we were so, well, there's all these email exchanges now we have from the Twitter files that show Dr. Fauci and his teams discussing this certain lab, this certain thing that they had concerns about. And they say as much as 75% probability this is coming from that lab. They go back and forth for several weeks that way. Then all of a sudden their email chain goes silent. You can't, I don't know if it's a function of the FOIA application or somebody doing some shenanigans, but you suddenly don't see a week. A week goes by and a Nature article is put out by this same group who 7 days prior were saying this is definitely a lab leak, defending the wet market source. And the real comedy, I've pointed out this over and over again, it's racist to say it came from this internationally known high-level technology of a coronavirus studying lab, but to say Chinese people are gross and eat animals in a wet market, that's not racist. It was incredible to me, and then that was sold to the American people as it's racist to say they've got this extraordinary lab, they've been doing research, not racist to say they're eating a pangolin.
Exactly, and I don't think they sell pangolins in that market anyways.
Right.
I don't think they ever have. But
right.
Yeah, everything you're saying. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please.
Okay. Well, everything you're saying that to me, looking back, of course, at the time, I didn't know. I knew right away that this escaped. They have lab leaks over there all the time. And I've been there a few times, not to that lab, but I know the country well. And it wasn't even a question. I remember telling Naomi, I said, "Oh yeah, it's definitely a lab leak, and probably from that military lab, that CBRN, or chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear lab that they have over that area." And then the minute Trump said it, all of a sudden it became, you can't talk about this. It's outside the window of conversation. You must be a racist. And as soon as Trump mentioned that it came from a lab, I was holding my head. I was like, no. Now we're not going to get anywhere on it. And he was right. He was definitely right. But it got so politicized that it just has held everything up. And we're getting to the truth, but look how much we've lost.
Oh my God. And it was so bizarre that it made me, do you have any theory that this same, maybe not the same group of scientists, but somehow the Chinese Communist Party was also involved in manipulating public opinion out here? Because it was so bizarre the way we became with it. Was there sinister forces at play, and where do you think that was?
Well, that's a great question, and that opens up a big topic. Almost all of our public opinion gets manipulated or at least affected by China, I would say at least since 2003. But if you look back, I think it was 2014, NBC signed a memorandum of cooperation with, I believe, Xinhua Newsnet while Steve Kappas was in charge of that outfit. Flash ahead a few years, both Reuters and Associated Press have also signed memorandums of cooperation to coordinate headlines and coverage of almost everything. So almost every, and I'm not even going to get into the Hollywood angle, but it's covert influence at a global scale, and they control the conversation. That's where a lot of the getting silence comes from, and that's led to this entire parallel universe of social media that I exist on and my wife exists on, and where all the lost toys got shoved over to.
The silencing was created by the Chinese party in some way?
I would say absolutely, because the silencing was really carried out by social media companies. Take Twitter, for example. I believe her name is Fifi Li. At the time, became the chief operations officer, and a former NTD reporter covered this well, and a friend. Her name is Jennifer Zhang. And Fifi Li used to be the AI person for the Chinese Communist Party and was the chief operations officer at Twitter. Facebook had been trying to get in that market. I believe that deal fell through, but the amount of influence they have because of their market, because of their reach, and because so many people have so much invested over there, including a lot of pension funds and private mutual funds. There's so much that they have that they can just nationalize. So the Chinese Communist Party can kind of call the shots on a lot of the messaging and what people have to do.
How do we undo this?
So I think the first way we undo this is Trump actually had a great bill that was supposed to go through and then got nixed, going into 2021, where anyone doing business with any Chinese company that has military contracts or does work with the military, they have to cease and desist that activity by, I believe it was January or the end of January 2021. Now, that was genius because on Trump's part, because at the end of November of 2020, the Chinese Communist Party announced that they had completed full military and civilian fusion of all companies. So basically, if there's a company in China, it's owned by the Chinese Communist Party. It is part of the military. It's part of the whole industrial complex.
That's something that Li-meng, who's going to come in here in a second, a point she has made, was that it was the People's Liberation Army that really initiated the work on the coronavirus, and they were sort of farming it out in various places. But her contention, I believe, is, I'll let her talk in a minute, that it was a bioweapon to start with. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. It's the perfect bioweapon. It doesn't kill, it wounds. Instead of taking one soldier off the field, it takes 3.
And is it likely that this was intentional, or did they just take full advantage of the leak once it occurred?
I feel the latter is what happened. I'm sure she will have probably a better perspective. She's closer to it. But to me, it seemed like they just kind of let it rip. I mean, they held on to it for a while. They shut down domestic flights, but they kept international flights open, they being the CCP. And what's really interesting, too, though, that I just have to point out really quickly, and this came up on a Twitter space the other day, and I forgot the gentleman's name who gave me this idea, but he's in Japan. He made a good point. He said, isn't it weird that Japan gets the most travel flights from China because of proximity, yet they were not one of the first hotspots?
And what does that tell you?
Well, what that tells me is this could have been either spreading for a while before it was really announced, or it could have been released in several locations. I have no receipts to back that, but that's what that tells me.
Well, there are people that take that position, epidemiologists that take that position. I've heard that argument before, which is, again, dramatic. Now, the other dramatic thing, before I take a break and bring Dr. Yen in here, is something your wife said that my wife could not get over, which was that she felt somehow the vaccine now is involved with all this. And it was a disturbing theory. What do you say?
From all the work that her incredible team of thousands of volunteers have done, I totally agree with her. It targets the worst adverse events seem to come and hit people between like 16 and 45, I believe. It seems to be taking out the fighting age men and women of this country, and the mandates seem to be pushed on first responders and special ops military first. I have a friend who had to leave special operations training because he wouldn't get the vaccine. So to me, knowing what unrestricted warfare is, which is tenderizing, taking out the enemy through multiple fronts before you have to fire a shot, taking out their messaging, taking away their history, and taking out their fighting force. Yeah, it seems like it could be a weapon for sure. Why else would they be pushing it? And why else would the Chinese Communist Party turn down Biden's offer for vaccines just like 4 weeks ago?
And what do you imagine? Let's say that's true. What would their end game be? How does that work? We're wounded. We're not destroyed. Is it that they would have a government, a centralized government like their? What do they imagine? What could they possibly be thinking?
Well, they've stated this in something called the China Dream, 2049, where they will be the dominant power in the world by 2049, which is the anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party under Mao Zedong. But they also have intermediate goals, such as Made in China 2030, where they are the 100% supply chain to the world. They need to keep us around for a little while because we are their lifeblood. Our consumerism fuels their power. And so, but the goal is by 2049, they rule the world. And this is well published.
But I don't even understand what that would look like as rule of the world. That they would have, we would be a Chinese puppet government. We would be I don't understand how that would work in today's world.
It would kind of, if you're familiar with the Belt and Road Initiative, this is their new Silk Road, where they give the no payback loans, these massive loans to rebuild infrastructures that mysteriously collapsed, especially when they adopted green energy. And what it would look like, this is going to sound funny, but the best way I could think of what it might look like is kind of like that world in Hunger Games, where there's the capital city and then everyone else is providing the resources for that capital.
Yeesh. Sounds like Rome.
A bit like Rome. Could have been where they got the idea.
Interesting. Oh my God. Well, Susan, before I bring Dr.
No,
Yan in?
bring Dr.
Okay, let me take a little break and then I'll bring her right in. So, Dr. Li-meng Yan, you may have heard her. She's certainly been on this show before. She's a virologist, a physician, known for her publications, a researcher in Hong Kong who fled and is now somewhere undisclosed, let's just say. She has several preprint papers to back up much of her claims. You can follow her at D-R-L-I-M-E-N-G, Yan, Y-A-N-1, Dr. Li-meng Yan 1. And she's also has a show on the Voice of America on America Out Loud Radio Network. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll bring our second guest on in here. I think you know how much Susan and I love our Genucell skincare and how easy it is to try our one-of-a-kind customer packages bundled with our favorite products. Susan realized the other day that one of our kids stole some of our deep correcting serum from our stash, if you will. We had no idea that the lactic and hyaluronic acid combo is so great for adult acne, dark marks, and scars. So not only are Susan and I hooked on these products, but apparently somebody else in our family is too. Somebody's ripping it off.
I know I'm a snob about the products I use on my face. Everybody knows it. Every time I go to the dermatologist's office, they're just rows and rows of different creams. Retinols, vitamin C cream, under eye cream, night creams.
Scrubs.
And then when I get to the counter, they're overpriced. All kinds of products that you can all find at Genucell.com. I've fallen in love with this product at a fraction of the price. I've been using Genucel for 6 months now, and I'm very impressed.
Great skincare is important at any age, and we love how amazing the results are. Thank you to Genucel. Plus, now you can find your very own bundle based on your unique skincare needs. Using cutting-edge AI skincare technology, you can get a full skin analysis instantly and create a skincare regimen tailored towards your needs. Visit Genucel.com/Drew to check out our favorites and enter that promo code DREW, D-R-E-W, at checkout for added savings. All orders include free shipping and a free mineral mask. Order now. Go to Genucel.com/Drew. That is Genucel, Genucel, Genucel.com/Drew. Buy gold and get a free safe to store it in. You heard right. On qualifying purchases from Birch Gold Group now through March 31st, they will ship you a free safe directly to your door. Here's the deal. Fed keeps raising rates because it is the only tool they have to keep inflation under control. But it isn't working. You can't spend your way out of inflation. You've seen the impact on the stock market. You've seen the impact on your savings. Hedge inflation by owning gold, whether physical gold and silver in your safe or through an IRA in precious metals where you can hold real gold and silver in tax-sheltered retirement accounts. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied customers. Visit birchgold.com/Drew for your free info kit on gold and to claim eligibility for your free home safe by March 31st on qualifying purchases. Again, visit BIRCH Gold, birchgold.com/DREW. And we have been talking to Brian O'Shea. Let's bring Brian back in here very quickly. Susan asked me to bring up one more issue before we bring Dr. Yen in here, and that is...
I think they should both answer.
Well, all right, let's bring Dr. Yen in here. Dr. Li-meng Yen with Brian O'Shea. And Dr. Yen, you can join in on this question. I'll direct it to Brian, and then you can ring in as well. And this was Susan's question. She, as she said in the opening comments of our show today, she was very concerned seeing Putin sitting there with it was some sort of ambassador to China. What is our sense of the relationship between China and Russia? And did our funding of the Ukraine war force Russia into the arms of China?
Well, that's your question.
Well, I think the relationships. Well, I know the relationship it's been there for a long time. They were doing joint naval exercises with the Iranians in October, so this to me seems like theater. And our saber rattling on the U.S. side, I honestly think that's kind of deceived the sky. Like, our government doesn't want to appear as cozy with China as everyone knows they are.
Oh, that's interesting. Dr. Yan, what do you say?
I want to say that it's not because you help Ukraine. It's actually because Ukraine is helping U.S. and the free countries to defend Russia and the China ally. Because I have the intelligence from People's Liberation Army, very top level. Even before the Ukraine war, we already received the intelligence that China, Xi Jinping and Putin has made a secret deal at the beginning of the Winter Olympic in Beijing. And also before that, they have already prepared a lot. Actually, because American and Western countries are the enemy for both Russia and China, and then they share the similar ideology and theory. They want to conquer the world and become glory all over the world. So that's why China basically is financially and also using all the sources globally to support Russia. If you can beat CCP government, then Russia will definitely lose the arms, so they can't do too much to damage Ukraine and the free world.
One of the sort of ideas you have emphasized is how poorly we understand the culture of the CCP, the attitude of the CCP and the Chinese people. Can you give a little primer on that and maybe do that in such a way as to support or refute some of the things Brian was saying?
What I want to say is, if we're talking about the relation between Soviet Union and Russia to China, basically we should consider that Chinese Communist Party originated from the Leninist organization and Marxism, which spread by the Soviet Union to Chinese. And later, China, those leaders like Chairman Mao, these people have adopted the Chinese culture, and basically they mixed those kind of Sark style, very chivalrous, no rule of law, no face all like this, and with this Marxism ideology, and also using the very strict Leninist organization to control people. And Chinese people are already under a lot of disaster conducted by our own government in the past over 70 years. They kill the brave people, and they torture you, kill the whole family, and also torture you to threat you. So that's why they have created both fair and also a fake culture, like brainwash you from the childhood to maintain their control. So now when we talk about CCP and talking about Russia, talking about Chinese people, we should know basically Putin government and the Xi Jinping government now dominate the two countries. However, the people are under the fear. If you give them freedom, they could fight against the regime. If not, they have very limited space to fight back because they were controlled in all the aspects, especially in China.
If you could tell the little story about how you got involved with the coronavirus and then why you left.
Okay, briefly that because I'm the medical doctor and also virologist, immunologist, working in the WHO reference lab at the University of Hong Kong. So at the end of 2019, the last day, when there was news come from Wuhan that Dr. Li-meng mentioned the coronavirus and then be punished by government, my supervisor, WHO expert Liu-meng, gave me a secret task. He and other WHO expert wanted me to say what is to investigate what exactly happened in Wuhan, because they were all worried about the SARS-1, that kind of case happened, and they don't want be cheated by CCP again like last time. However, they also he also repeatedly warned me that I have to keep silence and don't cross the red line. If not, I will be disappeared. So through my own exclusive network in China, involved the military and also civil hospitals and labs and even CDC in Beijing, and I quickly got the first-hand information, and I report to him and also other supervisors that the China government is cheating us, and also human-to-human transmission exists, and they have the virus sequence. So after that, within over 2 weeks, I realized that WHO chose to stay on the side with CCP, cheat America and cheat the world. So finally, when I realized that the virus sequence has already contained the secret, showed that how People's Liberation Army did gain a function to weaponize the virus, and I saw they tried to use me to create the nature origin theory. They tried to let me be the people to bring the raccoon dog as an intermediate host to cheat the world. So I choose to reveal this information to the world through Modern Media, a Chinese YouTube anti-CCP channel based in US. And after that, since 19th January 2020, my information gave CCP government a lot of that kind of stress. So they afraid someone already knows this secret, so they changed their strategy. They announced the human-to-human transmission within 24 hours, and a lot of change. After that, they quickly locked down Wuhan to stop the outbreak in China. However, they let the pandemic keep going on. And after that, because I keep working on coronavirus, I keep providing the information to all the media, to the public, until end of April 2020. I was warned by Mr. Wu, the host, that I would be disappeared soon by CCP, and because he got the intelligence. So with his help, I managed to escape to US and start to expose the things in US.
I want to make sure I heard you. So they were using you as the source of the story on the natural transmission, the zoonotic transmission. And what was the host
Yes.
that they were having you talk about? What host?
Uh, I think if you read a lot of the nature origin theory, especially recently, you would see like Dr. Eddie Holmes and the other nature origin big guys, they start to celebrate that, oh, there's someone goes through bat, pangolin, and the raccoon dog to
Okay,
human.
same.
So raccoon dog
The dog
is the
the dog.
animal. No,
Okay,
it's not dog. It's like the civet cat. It's not cat. It's similar like
I
small
see.
ferrets, that kind of animal. They want me to be the part to show people this kind of animal exists in Wuhan wet market, and the Wuhan people eat it, and so the virus jumps through it to human. And I believe they have already at that time prepared more samples from this poor animal, because they have already shown me the photo per animal in the cage, that just this animal go to check how they eat it, how they sell it in Wuhan. And why they choose me? Because back to 20 years ago in our lab, those same experts, when they were young, they are the first identified SARS-1 intermediate host as civet cat. Basically, it was the similar things repeated, but failed on my part.
Right. And that there was evidence for natural transmission, so-called. This one, as of yet, there's obviously no evidence of that. Let me ask just a
No.
quick question before I go back to Brian, which is, your husband and your family is left behind. Don't you worry about their safety?
I know my family are in China and I'm the only child, but I can do nothing because none of them know I have done this when I was in Hong Kong. And also, I can't help that, because the moment I escaped to US, even I was on the flight, CCP already got information, and they sent the state security and the public security people with government staff, with other law enforcement team to my home in Qingdao, and they controlled my family, and they pushed my family to convince me to go back to China. So this is very common tactic for CCP to treat dissidents, and my parents had under suffering surveillance even until now, I believe that. So I can't contact them after that. And for my husband, we married for 7 years. I thought I love him so much, so he should love me too. However, when things happened, he actually is part of the communist campaign, although he's not Chinese. He's Sri Lankan virologist working for WHO and my lab. So he chose to stay with CCP and their campaign. He worked with my ex-boss, Malik Paris, another Sri Lankan guy, and they helped China to hunt me. So at this moment, my husband is working in the University of Pennsylvania, because Malik Paris and CCP managed to help him obtain the virology position in that coronavirus lab in University of Pennsylvania, and he is still in the project to hunt me.
So, Brian, does any of this surprise you?
Does not surprise me at all. And I do know, and I'm sure you do too, Dr. Yang, about Operation Fox Hunt for similar type of things, where they've, and this is in the New York Times when Obama was president. The Chinese Communist Party.
Hunt.
Yeah, and is he part of Operation Fox Hunt?
Yeah, this
so
is considered as.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, to explain what that is, there are people on the ground within our country that will identify and harass and sometimes abduct U.S. persons and bring them back to China to face financial crimes or crimes, whatever crime they get accused of, and operating on our soil. And our presidents knew about it, and 8 of them did get arrested under Trump by the FBI, but they operate at every level. They're in every major city. If you want to attract their attention, I would recommend going to an Epoch Times newsstand and selling it, because they've even been known to harass people getting the Epoch Times at their newsstands.
What is it about Epoch Times? What's going on there?
Well, the Epoch Times is That's one of my favorite papers. A lot of friends over there, but their founder is Falun Gong, and he's been revealing. I mean, their paper reveals so much about the Chinese Communist Party, and so they really have it in for epic times, along with a lot of the American newspapers that seem to be aligned with the Chinese Communist Party, at least in terms of going after the epic times.
Dr. Yan, what do we do here? What do you recommend to Americans and to the medical system here? Do you have? I've not heard you give us any prescriptions, really. Do you have any ideas what we should be doing?
I mean, against the outbreak pandemic, or you mean generally?
Both.
Okay, I would say first, based on my study and also my talking with other experts who are in the investigation of COVID-19 in US, I have learned that Dr. Fauci and NIH have more power in US and also more international influence than I thought before I came to US. Yeah, I know there are so many leading officials and experts are compromised with China, or they choose to stay silent because of benefits or threats. However, what I want to say is, I think the biggest problem Americans facing in the pandemic is who you thought should protect you turns to help your enemy to harm you. And that is kind of biggest hurt for Americans. It cost millions of lives. Why it happened? Because you give too much power to one authority, NIH, and it's in the hand of a guy, Dr. Fauci, for over 40 years. I mean, imagine Xi Jinping only become chairman for 10 to 11 years, but Fauci has been 4 times longer than him on the position. And I heard even after 9/11, you even gave the military bioweapon or biodefense this kind of surveillance and also funding kind of power to Fauci. So imagine Xi Jinping stayed there. He has absolute power in China and many other countries. Fauci is a person, he also has his weakness, and if he want to become Xi Jinping, pandemic is the best opportunity for him to adopt it to US, and you even have no any chance to fight against it at that time.
So let me understand that really what you're saying is you're warning against centralized authority generally. You're pointing at this one figure, but you're naturally inclined, which was my sense at the beginning of the pandemic. We had physicians that were caving in terms of their sacred responsibility to initially local authorities, which were the hospitals and the county health officials, then the state health officials, and all of them were sort of taking recommendations from Fauci and the CDC. And is that centralization rather than the distribution, which is what, distributive services is what medicine is all about. One well-trained person making decisions on behalf of another person, not somebody on high making that decision.
No, and also America has the separation of power, right? In your law system and in many other aspects. Why do you give it to the public health, and even military biodefense area to one person? I mean, I don't mean Fauci would be the only one do this kind of things in such situation. Whoever you give this big power, I mean, most probably at that situation, he would be compromised, he would be used, he would be captured by like communist China or other regime or other organization to do the similar thing. So we should change this situation. The thing is, we still have the opportunities because in China, doctors has no chance to talk, but here we still can fight. So I don't want you to lose the opportunity to fight against it.
So we're freedom fighters all of a sudden. We thought we were here to take care of patients, and now we're all of a sudden freedom fighters. Brian, but her point is well taken. That is one of the insights after the pandemic is this wrinkle we have in our Constitution, which grants these fiat authorities to public health officials in an emergency. Is she right? That needs to change.
That absolutely needs to change. And it's worse than just the NIH. Above the NIH is HHS, and HHS is directly in bed with NHS and the WHO. The WHO, who I believe this week either has or will vote on this treaty, this pandemic treaty, which would take away all of our sovereign rights as a country. So I totally agree
Right.
with the doctor that if you have centralized power, you're easier to conquer. Right now, we have a bunch of states that have a lot of sovereignty and independence. They even have their own armies, and everyone has, well, a lot of people have guns. And you have to break that. That's why you never, in my opinion, you never, and these things are all connected. It's more than just the pandemic, it's all the social unrest that went with it. And when you hear, for instance, defund the police, do you ever hear defund the federal police? It was always the local police.
Right. Always the city's police department. Brian, you heard what Dr. Yun was saying. She was working on the backbone. She has some history as it pertains to the People's Liberation Army. I'm wondering if you have any questions for her.
Yeah, I did actually have one question. Are you familiar with the network of labs here in this country that seem to be doing the same thing? For example, Bat One Health, and I would point to someone named Dr. Barbara Hahn.
I don't know this doctor, but you are talking about One Health, right? I know about that, and
Yep.
although some details I need to double confirm, but I know that One Health also have a lot of contribution from Chinese Communist Party, and basically, I mean, in One Health, they're talking about control this kind of public health using a bunch of experts in that organization, and they're also talking about the universal vaccines against the emerging infectious disease. And I know it because my ex-boss, Malik Paris and others, they also are very important people inside. And based on what I know about these people's involvement in the China's CCP's weapon program, I really cannot be assured about this kind of organization. So no matter what kind of organization we have, still, as I said, we should avoid to give the power to a bunch of experts. For example, in the pandemic this time, why initially even your government and your intelligence, your military intelligence are all silenced because they deeply rely on the experts on coronavirus. However, coronavirus is a very small field. So Chinese Communist Party is the top government who owns the best coronavirus expert in the world, from SARS-1 to MERS, and most of them in my lab. And that's why they can easily influence and manipulate other coronavirus in the world. And finally, all their brains show the one idea that how to help China to promote the nature origin theory to cheat the world. So that's something we should be very aware of, no matter for One Health or other organizations.
And I think we should definitely, when we get a chance, to talk about One Health and the name.
That's what I want to hear. Tell us about that. Tell us what that is. What's going on there? What did you bring up?
It's really big, and I'm glad you hit on that, Dr. Yang. One Health framework really, it's this idea that all our health is connected with the health of animals and nature and everything like that. And there's an actual One Health framework that was written in 2018 that goes, it goes beyond medicine. It goes into finances, banking, how you're getting into your smart cities with this thing, your 15-minute cities. And you're going to love this. Backing up, One Health has been around since like the 30s or 40s. It used to be called One Medicine, and it's evolved. It's come and gone, but now it's really resurfaced. And the 2018 version was written by the World Bank Group, and the co-author was Eco Health Alliance, which is Peter Daszak's nonprofit firm.
Who was thought to be the funnel or the pass-through to the Wuhan lab for gain-of-function research? Has that been substantiated anywhere? Do we have evidence for that?
Dr. Yan?
Oh, so if you're
sorry to
talking
bounce that to
about
you.
no, I
Yeah.
thought you want to answer it first. So I believe that behind it, there are definitely money and support come from China. And also, as Brian just introduced, like smart city, all these things, I mean, translate to what China is using is digital code, the traffic light things to control people, camera always all over you, even can be in your classroom or restaurants. So these are the things that China adopted, and China want using this kind of organizations from Western countries to promote it. So not only One Health, because One Health would be one of the leading this kind of organizations. Another one, for example, I can provide, I'm not sure whether Brian would be interested into digging it out. It's called Global Virus Network. And if you check, they have been involved over like 20 or many big countries, including France, Japan, not Japan, Australia, maybe Japan, I'm not sure, and the China CDC. China CDC is basically the head office of military civil fusion studies in this field. So they have used like Dr. Robert Gallo in the University of Maryland, and who is Fauci's good friend, and also other people around the world to promote some similar strategy like One Health and control the voice in the virology field, in the emerging disease field.
And Brian, are they getting hoodwinked, much like they got hoodwinked into the lockdown? Is this a, are they in good faith going into these things? They're being convinced of the ideas, but really they're being persuaded falsely, much the way they were with the lockdown.
I don't know if these people, the real hardcore, and I know that I know the very organization you mentioned, Doctor. And I don't think these people are being hoodwinked. I think they want this. I think they really believe that this is the way forward with global health, and we know better than you how to keep you safe, and that seems to be the dominant attitude. And it's now, I think, if they achieve that type of power, I do believe that the Chinese Communist Party will take it right away from them and say thank you very much for setting it up. But
Yeah.
Dachian, you're laughing.
I agree that once they did it, China was okay. Now you are useless. You can be thrown under the bus, because that's what China can do. And those experts, they always thought they are superior to others. That means other people will be controlled in lockdown, in the vaccine, that mandatory policy, and also like the digital credit system. They thought they could avoid of that because they know how to manipulate this kind of system to become different as others, so they will have other privilege. However, they are too naive. They didn't know they are just the tools for the very, very evil regime behind it. It's like, you did it and I will eat you, and that's all. So that's why I laugh.
Yeah. Exactly.
So since Dr. Ju is not here, shall we talk?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say as well, what a perfect way to take power is with a global pandemic, because if you lay that over with One Health, which talks about actual buffer zones between animals and humans, that's when you start taking land. That's when you start herding people out of the rural areas, which are hard to control, and into areas that are controllable. And we've seen this happening here. For instance, the Carey Institute, which is near my house. I've driven down there. It's got tons of construction. And this is a collaborator with Peter Daszak, who's down the street as well. They talk about having these sort of, these buffer zones. And this is where that whole thing about the white-tailed deer came from. You may recall that. That was a study citing Barbara Hahn. Yep. And now white-tailed deer are going to give you COVID. But what I noticed is she finished those studies, I believe, 4 months before she released them. And then Newsweek and all the usual suspects ran wild with it. And they ran wild with it just in time for hunting season, mainly in Ohio, Pennsylvania, upstate New York. And what happens if all of a sudden hunting's too dangerous? Well, that's a good reason to go after guns.
I will say that first, decentralize this organization and reduce the power in one person or certain group of people. This is definitely the one of the fundamental way to solve this kind of centralized power and also their like their influence. And also, this would have to be done through different kind of policies. And also, you have to go back to check the weakness in the law, rule of law. And like now we know that biology definitely can be used to weaponize the pathogens and then create more damage than even nuclear weapons in human history. So how could we control nuclear weapons? Then maybe we should consider to use the similar or even the more strict way to control the materials in the biology. And also that cannot solve the things unless you end the evil regime, especially the Chinese communist regime. And of course, they have their allies, the evil Axis countries. But even among those countries, CCP is still the boss. So you have to
those of you
make it illegal. You have to make it illegal. You can't give them this kind of legal national authorities, and that's why they can do so many things. You should definitely end this regime. So without it, Russia cannot work functionally, and this organization cannot work functionally. And people like Fauci, they lose their support, and so they cannot work as before. So then, little by little, we have to make it back to the normal order.
So we had a meltdown on our system, which was of a
CCP shut us down.
Of a nature that we've never experienced before. We ended up having a loud siren
It
come
sounded like a
through on
fire
our,
alarm went off and the soundboard froze up.
And everything froze and
we
melted.
We missed the best part.
So I will go back and listen to your conversation. I assure you.
Congratulations. This is your award. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Yan. Yeah, between the two of you, you caused a complete meltdown of our system.
We could see your lips moving, so we knew everything was okay on your end. So I hope everybody got some good messaging out there.
I don't think the Twitter Spaces could hear anything, but I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, we probably lost Twitter Spaces, but that's okay. Anyways, continue.
Yes, so I kind of get a sense of what you guys were talking about while we were out running around in circles trying to regain our technical footing. Is it possible we were being censored by someone?
Of course.
Anything's possible these days.
Dr. Yan said, of course, she said.
You can ask Dr. Urso, for example. He has told me that since he contacted me, that I don't think people should know it because that was even before I appeared with him in the same broadcast or event, and he received the unknown threats to warn him, keep away from me. And later, when we appear in the same public event, he also received this kind of threats. And he's not the only one received such threats because they support my work or they appear with me in the same public event. So I'm not surprised that you get cyber attacks and behind it should be the CCP's military. But I would say that these people are coward. They can't do too much, especially for Americans at this moment.
I would have enough trouble listening to you say that, Dr. Yan, but with Brian next to you going, oh, yeah, that was extremely difficult to hear.
Well, I'm gonna play the Dr. Drew side, which, usually is a moderate voice. And I'm going to just say the roadcaster just had a glitch and started
first time in 3 years.
At us. Yeah, it is rather a coincidence.
Yeah, first time in 3 years. All right.
Maybe it's a ghost, Drew.
Yeah. Oh, that's more likely. That is more likely, Susan. Thank you for that theory. more likely a ghost than some outside force. Okay. Fine. But I want to go back to the virus a little bit again, Dr. Yan, if you don't mind, and the sort of the extent to which you had brought me to understand that the Chinese Communist Party, if they were to have released something like that, either intentionally or accidentally on their own people, what happens to the people sort of doesn't matter. so long as it advances the cause of the CCP. Am I saying that accurately? You would always say to me, they don't care. They don't care what happens because they've got some bigger, much the way the collectivization occurred and killed millions of people. They don't care because there was a bigger goal in mind. Is that still the mindset of the CCP?
First, when we talk about to harm our people, there are two possibilities. One thing is they just want to use you as the white mouse to do the trial. And based on our source, China government has conducted such human trial not only once using different type of pathogens. And I'm not at liberty to explain too many details at this moment. And also the other situation is, okay, so we want to punish you. So that is most probably happened also at the end of last year, right after the white paper revolution. Then immediately, like 900 million Chinese people get infected and millions of them died. We even don't know the real number. And the thing is, when China do it to foreigners, that is definitely for the political purpose. And so I just want to read something you definitely should be interested in. Read original document from one of the top CCP think tank in Beijing that is called Renmin University. They have a think tank called Chongyang Institute. And this is from one of the 4 groups in that institute. They provide on May 2022 a report, big document about the infectious disease and the big countries' rise and fall. This is the title of the whole document. And they have, in the beginning, they have mentioned that the infectious disease in the human history can cause the biggest regime fall or rise. So clearly, I want to quote to you, they said, the anti-COVID-19 failure exposed the American government's public health capacity have a lot of weakness and their incapability of the national power. This weaken Americans' leading power in the world. It accelerate the fall of U.S. And this also can remind that competing with U.S., if China could do it better than U.S., and so China will win in this competition against the U.S. That means the rise of this regime. So I think I don't need to translate more, and you could probably already understand what it means, right?
Yeah, I understand that it's ominous. I really can't get my head around exactly what it means. It's hard to get a sense of that. And well, particularly since 3 years ago, I thought we were entering sort of a global community where everyone, was respecting boundaries and sharing in business sort of pursuits. Brian, I guess you've sort of always felt that was kind of a delusion, right? Given that you know how the CCP works.
Well, I know how the CCP works and a lot of how the world works. I mean, when I saw many of the countries I went to, that would never work. And I also know that the CCP is not wanting to share power. They are nationalists to the nth degree, meaning they want the world to be China and they want to run it.
So they are active colonialists, which is the boogeyman in this country to have ever been.
I would say colonialists or marauders.
Marauders. In what
I
sense?
remember just. Can I add a little bit? Yeah, yeah. Brian has mentioned that when in the last conversation you and the doctor had talking about what kind of country China want America become, like puppet or whatever. Yeah, like one belt, one road countries. Well, and we from our sources in CCP, they told us Xi Jinping has a very good example, Argentina. They want America become like Argentina, lose the glory in the world and go to the situation that you are even incapable to go back to the center of the world.
Interesting.
I don't see Argentina quite. I mean, Argentina.
Argentina was kind of rich before, and the people enjoyed the life in the last century for quite a while. But later, when it failed to follow the space of the world, I can say So they basically lose that position, and if they want to go back to become dominant in the world, it seems not quite possible, at least in decades.
Right.
So that's what China want. Like, you accept their ideology, their chaos, their civil war in U.S. Democrats and also Republicans fight against each other. Some area you don't have weapon, some area you have weapon, but massive shooting, crimes, all like this. So they want you get into like hell life, even worse than Argentina, and you have no way to go back.
You have made the point that we need to, we have the possibility of fighting. I think you're talking about for freedom. I think that's a way of framing it. And that we need to fight because we have the possibility of being able to fight, right? That would be an accurate way of reflecting your position?
Exactly. You still have the freedom, although Americans feel that especially in the past 3 years, you start to have less and less freedom. However, you still have freedom. Americans don't know the life in mainland China for real Chinese people. And you don't know how much they can bring from you and never give back to you. So if you want to say, oh, that happened in China, also can happen in America, we feel upset, we can do nothing, you are wrong. The very good example is, I do this thing in China, I already lost my wife. However, here, there are not only me, there are so many people like you and like Brian, like so many others, still can speak out and fight against the unfair treatment. And even we can change it. So now we say the turning point. So that means still we have the opportunity and the capability to fight for freedom. So that's why I would say we don't have much time. I talked about that 3 years ago from Fox News. And still now I want to tell you, we really don't have much time. So we cannot give up. We have to fight.
I noticed, Brian, I've seen more China's our friend type little, I don't want to call them uprising, but little flashes in the news that seem to fly around social media. Is the CCP, is that just a political movement in this country, just that, just a different point of view, or is the CCP involved with manipulating that?
I think it's a little of both. I think there's something I think the Soviets referred to as useful idiots who have a utopic type image of what communism is because they only see the version that the CCP wants them to see. And then I also believe that a lot of it is manipulation. The CCP will infiltrate organizations. I had a debate in August on a radio show called Bard's Radio, and he he could not get his head around the fact that the CCP might be bad. And I was like, just go beyond CNN, I guess. Do a little homework. So yeah, so that that was the big thing. I think it's all manipulation at some level, whether it is manipulating people at the point of education. I would also say too that I agree with almost everything you said, Doctor, but I don't agree that they want anything for us but for us to not be here. I do believe that the CCP wants our land and our resources. They don't want us.
Well, what do you mean? You said they don't want you.
They don't want the people, they want the land and resources.
Oh, they also want the people. People can be the slaves. In China, they call people as human man. That comes from the People's Daily, the state parties media. They thought you have more people, you have like the man, you can dig it, and this man are consumable and keep going on. So trust me, it's not necessary, they won't kill all Americans, and they just want to use you like how they use Chinese people.
I mean, respectfully, and I hear you, but respectfully, I'd say that they've had 2 years to watch that they can't enslave about half the Americans. And there's also a huge population of firearms in this country that has increased exponentially on both sides of the political aisle since 2021. So what I would say in that case is that, to me, has always been the reason why the southern border has been opened. And that's why so many working age people are flooding in, because the jobs will be here. But why not make sure you can staff them with people you can control rather than people you hope to control?
Well, I don't know how you
I
sort out the troublemakers like us. How would you sort out the troublemakers from the ones you know you can control?
I have T-shirts that say "troublemaker," and I wear mine proudly. So I'm happy to distribute those.
Oh my. Well, I knew I'd get upset talking to you guys. I always do. I always do. It's just so greatly concerning to me. But I do always hear the message from now Brian. I heard it from Naomi, your wife, Brian's wife, and I've heard it from Dr. Yen. Is speak up. That you have to really. Freedom is never free. You have to fight for it, and we may be. You certainly both believe this to be true, or in a bit of a struggle here that we may not be aware of. But certainly our freedoms were highly compromised for a couple of years, and I never really thought I'd be having this conversation, late in my career. But here we are. It seems important, wherever it's coming from, that we sort of learn to. I noticed the French were doing this too, sort of reestablish our commitment to liberty. It's something that's very very, very precious. And we have, even if we haven't been on some sort of systematic attack, we have been attacked. It has been assaulted in many different interesting ways. Dr. John, is there anything, as we wrap up here, anything new on your radar, anything you're concerned about imminently?
Okay, first I want to say that I didn't feel we have disagreement, Brian. Maybe there's some misunderstanding between my constituents.
No,
I think we share similar.
No. No. I think you might have misunderstood what I was saying. I did not say disagreements. I was saying that this is upsetting news. This is troubling. So that's all. We all agree. There's no disagreement, I think.
Sure. I mean the point that they want Americans or not want Americans. I think it's up to the situation. For China government, definitely they have the preparation. If you are going to in the war or something, and she is a crazy guy, he would use nuclear weapon if he feels a direct threat, and so we should do it before he realizes that. Maybe, I just suggest in case, in Chinese Communist Party theory, they said we can pay double people to eliminate all the Americans. You have 300 million, we have 1.4 billion, double, right? They definitely can sacrifice half of Chinese to kill Americans. But also, if they thought they can use Americans, brainwash you, enslave you, they will be happy to do so. So that just shows how evil they are. And I also want to tell people, we have to stop Chinese Communist Party as soon as possible, because based on my sources, and I can tell you, China is hard working on more unrestricted weapons, and we can't guarantee whether next time it would be more transmissible, it would be more lethal, and we don't know what kind of things they will release, because definitely the most probably they won't release it from China next time. They will start it from the countries they can control, the One Belt, One Road country, or Africa, Southeast Asia. They are talking about pangolin and bats from the Burma, Cambodia, Laos. They are talking about hemorrhagic fever from Africa. These are all the things they are working on. And the sources, one of the sources almost cried when they told us, because they have seen something in the labs and they are so scary even when they heard about that. So a lot of things we must do to stop it.
Well, I thank you both for being here and sort of ringing the alarm bell a bit. Do you guys have, either of you, before we say goodbye, have suggestions what we need to do to stop it? Dr. Yan?
I do. I'll go. I'm sorry.
Okay, go, Brian. Brian, go ahead.
I was going to say
first, Brian, then Dr. Yan.
A lot of people ask, how do you fight something so big? And it's a question I get every day. And what I always tell people is, first of all, never give an inch on any of your beliefs or what you think is best for your children and your health. Never give an inch. Get a second opinion. I thought everyone did that anyways. Second part is, you have to fight things at the local level, and you have to get involved. Get involved in the school committee. Get involved in, what's happening with the park down the street. If all of a sudden it's closed off, start asking questions. And if people are corrupt and their local, you have to let your local community know who they are and get them out of your community. And that's how you start. Those are the foot soldiers in the county level. And that's how the CCP infiltrates every country, is from the bottom up, not from the top down. So if you fight back at the county level or the local level.
Interesting. That's the practice of democracy, as Alexis de Tocqueville said. Dr. Yen, what do you say?
I want to say that people always ask me, what can we do? I would tell you, you need choose and you need courage. Both things will help you to do whatever you want. However, now I also want to add something. Is choose has power and also courage is powerful. But if you lose freedom, none of them will work.
So keep fighting for freedom. I thank you both for being here. Did I give Dr. Yen's basics where we can find her? Dr. Yen, where can we find you?
Twitter. I'm on Twitter. A lot of fake accounts made by CCP, but just found the one Dr. Li-meng with over 70,000 followers. And also can find me on Truth Social, Gap, and the voice of Dr. Yen from American Outlaw Network.
And Brian?
You can find me on Twitter at Brian O'Shea SPI, right there. I'm also on Getter at Brian O'Shea. It gets confusing. And then always you can find me at Daily Clout or wherever you find Naomi. I'm not far away.
Great. We'll say thank you to say hi to Naomi for us, and Jen, hopefully we'll talk soon.
She's a lucky woman.
Bye-bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
And Caleb, bye-bye.
God bless them.
Caleb, the upcoming schedule, let's put that up there. We have, what's today, Thursday, so I believe we'd have a Tuesday show.
So how are you feeling, Drew?
About what I expected.
I mean,
callers.
give us your emotions right now.
My emotions are awash. I liked Brian's local, fight at the local level. I think that is really a very powerful way to look at things. I am more disturbed by some of the things Dr. Yen was saying as it pertains to these upcoming viruses that they're studying. And,
right. And we'll probably ignore it because they'll be like, oh, it's nothing. It's going to be,
Well, it actually made, what it made me think? It made me think about this particular pandemic and how certain I was that the American research, science, and medical community would come up with some solutions. That was one of the reasons I was trying to get everyone to calm down. I felt confident that this country would come up with some things, and we did. Unfortunately, and these were the mRNA vaccines and the J&J vaccine, and I believe in the strongest terms that helped us interrupt this pandemic back in the Alpha and Delta phase, gave us time, saved lives while the Omicron took over. And once Omicron was in the system, it wasn't so clear that we needed to worry about this virus anymore in otherwise healthy younger people. Why we have persisted in taking this thing that was so dramatically important for interrupting, I think, I would still defend as interrupting the pandemic as it was in 2020. What we're doing with it now is not so clear to me. Again, I'm clear if somebody is 7 years of age. I'm not clear if somebody's 30 or 25. And I worry about that. That's all. It's just weird to me that we have these excesses. We always tend to excesses. The mask was excess. The lockdowns were excess. The vaccine may, I'm not even saying it is yet, may prove to be excess. And we're not able to adjust course and make risk-reward analyses along the way. And
use common sense.
So that's where my thinking has, that's what her talking about a new pandemic triggered in my thinking. I immediately thought about that.
Well,
I thought,
she said they're coming.
And I thought, oh, we'll come up with a vaccine. And I thought, ugh, and then what? And then will we use it properly, or will we overdo it? Or I know. So it's these.
It'll be targeted at people that are good on the microphone. Remember when the Nazis came into the Czech Republic or into Prague, and I heard from my family that the first people they killed were the announcers because they were warning people.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I mean, listen, everybody should be aware that we're not immune to world war, and it's
Yeah.
already starting.
Well,
so
what I find also disturbing is this is these things, these ideologies cause people to do not so good things.
And freedom is important. Like, we have to remember that she's grateful to be in the United States. She's not really free because she can't like walk outside without worrying about being shot.
Right.
But her voice is free.
What was it she talked about? Oh, the colonialism. We in the West have just guilt about being colonialists, while this gigantic force is coming in as a colonial force to take over the world. It's like why can't we look at that colonialism and judge that one as well as we judge ourselves as having been colonialists? So that's something I took away from that conversation.
Having different beliefs in how systems should work and wanting to take over the world is not being we're not being racist against that. We have to just protect ourselves. And if this, well, you're being racist because you don't like their way of being, but it's like, no, they want what we have, pretty much.
Well, I think we've also established
being woke doesn't help.
They both emphasize the importance of freedom and the importance of doing what you know to be right and staying with it and fighting for that. And there you go.
And they haven't changed in 100 years, so it's nothing new,
Okay.
Right. And keep in mind that the United States, we're only 246 something years old, and China is 3,500 years old of written history. So they can very easily play the long game because they have been doing that for thousands of years.
Yeah, and obviously communism is a new chapter in that long history, but you're right. They have a much longer horizon than we do. We tend to be much shorter. And there were a couple of things that occurred to me. I didn't ask them. One was this focus on safety and the government making things safe, and that being so appealing to people. Why is that so appealing to have some centralized force keeping you safe? That just seems. It seems kind of distasteful to me. I don't know.
We used to have the strongest military in the world when Reagan was around, right? So then,
but the keeping safe is really not from a standpoint of external military assault. It's keeping me safe from pathogens and from things that might hurt me and car accidents. It's just all these things that are just part of living. I don't know why. I don't know. And yet, by the same token, not paying attention to the more serious outside forces that might come in upon us. I'm
just really glad that you're willing to speak openly to people like this, and you're not afraid, and you're not being told by some government job or a news channel what you can and cannot say. I'm just really proud of you for listening to their points of views and listening.
Yeah.
And it's not. We're not predicting, Armageddon. But you know what? I've always been afraid that Russia and China were going to get together and we were going to be in a war with them. Mm-hmm. And now it just seems more likely. For some reason, I'm not as afraid as I was, not knowing this. But
did anything that Jen say today upset you or make you more anxious, or no?
I mean, I've always known this about China over the years. You've heard me say it a million times, don't trust them. They're up to something. But it's just, the asymmetric warfare and and then also the nuclear arsenal, that's not good.
If you guys I'm going to bring a couple of calls up if you guys can bear with me.
We didn't lose Twitter space. Oh, I guess we didn't because your phone was still on.
Well, I don't know how much they heard.
We just didn't have sound.
I just saw the physician up at the podium. I asked Stephen to come on up. Stephen.
Oh, hello.
Hey there.
I wasn't. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I got you.
Yeah. I wanted to point out a couple of things. The lab leak theory has always seemed to me to be likely because, as everyone has said, the bats live a long way away from Wuhan.
Yep.
And in the original SARS in 2003, you could see immediately where the disease had jumped to people because it was very infectious, and that was in southern China.
Right.
And so you would have seen with this virus a whole bunch of intermediate places like in southern China.
Right.
Except you didn't. It started in Wuhan.
Correct.
And people, I think Fauci and a bunch of people thought it might be like MERS, the Middle Eastern virus, which got all the way to Saudi Arabia without any intermediate infections. And the reason for that is that it wasn't a very infectious virus.
Right.
So
More deadly,
this virus-
more deadly, but less infectious.
That's right. Yes, more deadly but less infectious.
Yeah.
So this virus is tremendously infectious. It has a signature. It would have immediately have been noticed with the cross from animals to people,
Yep.
but wasn't. So it was what the dog didn't do in the night, as it were.
Yes.
Which makes us suggest that it originated in Wuhan and not in a wet market either, because it would have again been completely obvious that it had.
Yes.
So that was most likely. But then the question is, okay, probably came out of the lab, but how did it get in the lab? And obviously it arose there. But there are a bunch of ways that a virus can arise in a lab that are either deliberate or not deliberate.
Yeah.
A virus can mutate in a lab as well as in animals.
Sure.
You can get two viruses in one lab dish, or you can passage a virus in human cells. You have to remember this virus is grown on Vero cells, which come from African green monkeys. So the virus has access to all these mammal genes.
Yep.
And you never know what it's going to do with them. And so we're still trying to figure out where this happened. Now, the Fauci and company, their argument is that gain-of-function stuff would only be done on a gain-of-function coronavirus platform, one of those platforms that's already been known. And so it probably didn't arise that way. And I accepted that argument until reading a 2018 paper not very long ago, in which the scientists at Wuhan were trying to put a furin cleavage site in a bat virus.
Of course.
And damn it, you can call that what you want, but the furin cleavage site helps this virus, we know, quite a lot. It isn't absolutely necessary, but it helps it a lot.
Yep.
And putting a furin cleavage site in a wild bat virus does not seem to be a very good idea to me.
Nope.
The only virus that has one is interestingly the old MERS virus. It doesn't help that one, but it certainly helps this one.
Dr. Yan, who I was just talking to, worked on this virus. She was asked by the People's Liberation Army to work on this backbone, to do certain kinds of experiments with it because they were developing it.
Yeah, and it seems a little crazy to use a recently caught wild virus as a backbone. It's kind of like using mice you catch in your basement as a backbone. People would use some kind of strain from Jackson Labs, like albinos or black sixes or something. They wouldn't just use mice they caught in their basement. This is like using mice you caught in your basement. It's kind of a crazy idea.
But if you're trying to do something secret, it sort of makes some sense. But again, back to your point about the Fauci and his group. I mean, there's all these emails now with them talking amongst themselves about how likely this was this particular thing they were worried about. They were aware of it. 75% probability. That's what this is. Then the email chain goes silent for 7 days, only 7 days. And then the Nature article comes out about natural transmission. And it's just, what? We're same people, now totally different point of view. And by the way, one view is racist. It's racist to say that they have a high level, highly technologically sophisticated lab that might have had an error, but it's not racist to say they're gross and eat animals at a wet lab. That's not racist. Yeah. Just ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and I just have to, it may well have been some studies they were doing trying to improve a wild virus.
Yeah.
But I have to caution that never blame active malice for what can be also explained by stupidity, inattention.
I agree.
Sloth.
Yes.
All those things.
Yep.
We've all seen they're way more common than active malice.
I agree. That's sort of my take on it too. Thanks, Stephen. It's like there's an accident. Accidents happen. They were working with some really dangerous stuff. I'm not so sure that they should have been working there, but let me get this.
Brian's on there on Twitter. He's listening, and he just texted me. He said he wanted to explain the safe part.
Brian,
so he may log back in to.
I see Brian over here. I'll get him. I
think he's going to log into the VMix. So
okay, Chaya, is that you?
Hi, Dr. Drew. How are you?
Excellent.
Good. I sent you something on the back channel regarding Marburg virus. Take a look at it. I don't want to discuss it publicly yet, but just take a look a little bit about it. It's very interesting. It's a case workup.
I was when Dr. Yan said that her colleague was crying when he or she talked about what they were doing there, what they were developing in China. I immediately thought of the Marburg virus.
Yeah, I did too.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So look through the protocol that I sent you and some background on it. And if you ever want to take a deep dive, let me know. Okay. Secondly, I had mentioned to you last time I got to speak with you on here regarding increases in ALS post-vaccination.
Yes.
So I just spoke to my buddy who's the director of one of the largest ALS clinics in the U.S. this morning, 9:30 a.m., and he has like not slept in like 3 weeks. They are just swamped. And, you know, on average, it's one case in 100,000, I think 2 in 100,000 at most, with an active amount of 16,000 people living with ALS per year in the U.S. with a 4-year
survival
4-year survival rate. Yeah. And I told you we were seeing the ramping up of it. So now we've got some real numbers. I think I posted in the feed the new 2022 numbers, and you could see a huge jump in cases as well. So that's going to be very interesting and
concerning.
Yeah, very concerning. Coincidentally, there's 9 drugs that went into study in 2022 for ALS, more than ever has occurred before. It's a 60% increase in research drugs. I thought the timing of it was very unusual because all of a sudden, all these came to market and all these people are researching it in 2022. And so obviously, you know, not to say coincidence, but, you know, with what we've seen lately, coincidence and conspiracy has turned out to be
crazy
a fact pattern.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
There are no
find that very interesting.
coincidences.
Thanks, Jai. I'm going to
my
bring
world.
Brian back up. Brian, Caleb, I think you have Brian. Yeah, Brian, what's going on?
Yeah, we cut him off too soon.
Okay.
He has more to say.
Okay, go.
He's just like you, Drew.
Oh, well, I certainly don't want to overstay my welcome. But I did want to, you mentioned...
Impossible.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you. You mentioned fear earlier and why safety earlier. And I do want to say that, and a lot of people know about the vaccine confidence program. This is what's called a covert influence operation. It's kind of like the strategic propaganda, if you will. And the reason they keep saying safe, keeping you safe on Twitter, keeping you safe from nationalists and everything. Anytime you say the word safe, it reminds people there's something to fear, and fear is a major way to control people, especially when the fear is of the unknown, which is why there is so much confusing information. And a lot of that is buffoonery, but there was so much confusing, like what's coming in over the horizon. It's a lot scarier. And our PsyOps used to do this in Desert Storm, Desert Shield. They would overdub the sound of tons of helicopters, evil laughter. My brother was in that war, and by the time they came over the sand dunes, if you will, there's a million white flags. Like the Iraqis, like, I don't know what's coming, but I give up. And so that's why fear is very, very powerful, and that's why safety is used to remind people there's something to fear, whether there is or not.
But I get that 100% when governments do that. What I don't get is why the populace, particularly of this country, would be so prone to fall for that. Like safety becomes such a, I always say, I call it safety uber alles. Like safety uber alles becomes this almost like religious creed. And it's disturbing to me.
Well, I would say go back to the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, the China really bad videos aside of the guy falling and catching himself. But look what they did in this country, especially New York City. They opened up Hart Island, which is, the pauper's grave island out there off the coast of, I think, the Bronx, and where they were showing people being buried in mass graves. They had the refrigerator trucks overfilling with, what could be or could not be dead bodies. And then it just went away. And what was interesting is if it was so dire, then why did the mayor of New York not use, what was it, the ship called the Independence, I think, or I forgot the name of that.
Well, they also had the Javits Center was set up as a hospital. The Javits Center and the Navy ship, neither of which were used.
Exactly, and that's the type, and you saw the effect. Now, this doesn't have that effect on a lot of some people. It seems to have less of an effect on people who are independently employed or own their own business, and it's because they don't have as much to lose. But for the people that have given up, and this is not to say anything bad about people. I worked for the Army for a long time, but the thing is, when you're not used to being in control of your own life, the less control of your life you have, the more you have to fear from those people that you perceive as running your life.
True.
Interesting. And your wife taught me, at least suggested that one of the reasons for the bodies accumulating were that they had shut down all the mortuaries. Because of the lockdown, they prevented mortuaries from doing their job, and therefore the hospitals had to hold the bodies. That's why they needed refrigeration units.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I have to look, but that sounds logical.
It's your
and
wife that told me
reasonable.
that. Just go, Naomi. Confirm this.
My wife does so much research and puts out so much stuff. She's asking me all the time, "Do you see my latest report?"
Oh, I remember when
Yeah.
we have a New York feed television. I watch New York news because we go there so frequently. But I remember one of the trucks was like leaking blood, and it was in Brooklyn, and it did scare the hell out of everybody there.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it was so. And why we report that, I don't know.
Yeah, well, let's be fair. New York had a big problem. They had a huge problem. It was not something to minimize, but it may not have been. The feeling that was generated may not be commensurate with the fact of the serious thing that we went through there.
Right.
Well, and I would say also, and then I'll give up the mic. I would say also that the big push was to put people on their screens and to control what they see. And so Naomi and I made a point at the time. I was working for a large Native American company all the way in Washington State, and I made a point to drive out there from New York every time to see what was actually happening. Wow. And one example I'll give is we were driving through South Dakota when CNN and the usual suspects, we could just call them all Genois, they were reporting how South Dakota was bad because she wasn't locking down the governor of that state. And they were reporting that this Avera hospital had these overflowing beds and everything in their ER. We happened to be staying a mile away. I said, let's go check it out. I have it on video. I'll definitely reload it. I went over to the ER. There was no one there. I went up to the security booth and I made something up as to why I was there. I said I was looking for the COVID testing center. And I said, hey, good job. You really cleaned up all those bodies. It was like overflowing. And they said, oh, that was footage from a New Year's Eve celebration 2 years ago.
Well, again, this was the stuff that I could see happening at the beginning and why I pushed back so hard.
Panic porn.
And then now I'm called a COVID denier, and I just didn't want the panic porn making things worse. And, anyway. I've also learned during this pandemic that you can't trust anything. I did not know you can't trust anything coming out of the press. Nothing.
And also,
any press.
YouTube was censoring us left and right. Like, that was all run by, I thought, had some connection to China because they were owned by them or whatever. And I was just like, I knew it. I could just tell. Well, finally, we got to talk to somebody. Oh, come on, Drew.
I could just tell it's not evidence, but okay.
So, it was a ghost, okay?
Yeah, here we go again. All right. So, Brian, thanks again. I'm going to say farewell one more time, and we are actually going to wrap up now.
And thanks for coming back on, because I know we kind of went short. Drew kind of, I was in a lurch. I needed to calm down. So I'm glad that you came back to help us.
On a short notice. Yeah, it's great to talk to you. Pleasure was ours.
Thank you.
And thank you, those of you on the Twitter Spaces coming up and chatting. We appreciate that always. We are going to try to take calls. We are going to, since the show is called Ask Drew, we are going to try to do that every show. We are going to try to take some calls every time. I'm not sure. We've had such great guests. So you'll see we have great guests coming up. We're going to do callers on Tuesday.
I'm just so impressed with the high level of people that come on the Twitter Spaces and ask questions. I was so worried we're going to have a bunch of trolls, calling you names.
No, but there are people that are worried and thinking and trying to figure this out.
Great audience, and we really appreciate your questions, and we're going to take more.
Yes, we will try to do so. But for today, we have to wrap this thing up. We appreciate you all being here. We'll see you on Tuesday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.
Dude, if you're straight and gay, it's not accepted.
Straight and gay.
I'm not saying everybody. I'm just saying a lot of guys, a lot of guys that are into MMA, a lot of guys into moto, a lot of guys into motorsports.
Stuff you're into.
Yeah.
Get put off by
I fucked
this.
up, Drew. I should have been like into
Musical
ballet.
comedy.
I
Like
would have
me.
had so many more people just being like, hell yeah,
Maybe
Jason.
take you some shows. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm gonna
maybe.
take you. I'm the other kind of gay.
Yeah.
I'm the straight gay.
You are.
You're the gay straight.
Yeah. Seriously, you're way gayer than me. Like, if anybody looked at us like, hey, do you know one of these guys is gay? It's him. It is him for sure. Look at me. Touch me with a dick, I'll bite it off. You straight up your non-prostated ass.